people have published articles saying it does not really make sense to have families. Why have families? You spend so much money on your children. In fact, philosophy is like this. What you see above the surface is the visible effects of your science and technology, but many times assumptions are not stated. The name of the roboticist is Rodney. He says, I am a robot. He wrote an entire article saying, I am nothing but a robot. And he says that we give human beings too much importance. And he thinks that in fact robots are exactly like human beings. How do you want to do the tarbiyat of your children? Like a carpenter would create something, or like a gardener? Okay, so we have one more session before we finish. And the second section is about multiplex intelligence, about epistemology. Epistemology is a word that refers to the means of learning knowledge, the sources of knowledge, and we want to emphasize that there is not just one style of intelligence, and there is not just one science. You need to complement science also with revelation and other kinds of knowing, even intuitive knowing. That's also a source of knowledge. Okay, to understand this, we need to differentiate between two kinds of problems. I showed you one example of Martin Luther King, who was saying about misguided men and guided missiles. So guiding missiles is easy because those problems are convergent. So I'd like your attention before we finish. This is an important concept. So convergent means a single right answer. Okay, so science is often like this. There is a single right answer. If you want to control a missile, there is a science you can have for that. But you also have divergent problems. These divergent problems are never solved, but you have to deal with it, and you have to balance polarities for this. So different people will come up with different answers. There are different solutions. You can have creativity. So in this way, everyone in this class can be creative because they can balance their own circumstances and polarities in unique ways. So let me show you about these two different kinds of problems. In convergent problems, different people will converge to the same answer. You find this in the natural sciences, like in physics. Here you have clear parameters and you use maths, experimentation or optimization. In engineering, optimization means solving a problem to find the optimal single answer. But in life, optimization might mean going into an either-or approach, this or that. But we don't want this or that. In many cases, like I showed you, we want both, and we want religion as well as science. We want both polarities at the same time. We want to use technology, we want also to be connected to tradition. Divergent problems are more understood in the Eastern world. Maghrib ki sakafat ज़्यादा convergent focused hai, convergent science. This is the science we have for the last 200-300 years. It's more black and white. The divergent problems are symbolized by this yin and yang. It's found out in engineering, policy, design, architecture, creativity, management, where things don't have single answers. And if you solve a thing in a certain way, then over time you create another kind of a problem, right? Like I mentioned of a polarity, work and rest, they are polarities. If you are working all of the time, it will create another kind of a problem. And then you go to rest and you keep in the rest phase, it will create another kind of a problem. So you need to, dynamically have an interplay of both poles. And this allows you to act with wisdom and creativity. There is no final answer here. And this is key because most of the critical issues in the world, they are divergent. The learning, the tahqiq that you need to do it yourself. No one can put that realization in your heart. They can give you information, but it is your own thing. You have to deal with it over your lifetime. An example of a convergent problem is solving Maxwell's equation, doing civil engineering problems, determining the boiling point of a substance. There is a single answer you can have for that, or close answers within a certain precision. With divergent problems, the more diversity you have, the better it is. Okay, this is why we are required to do Shura. This is why politically, one person cannot solve a divergent problem. You need to sit together, get perspectives, have some old people, young people, some male, some female, some engineers and some designers and some social scientists and some philosophers, because they bring their own perspectives, and then you can harmonize them to come to a better solution. And the critical thing is, this thing will also change over time, because divergent problems, they are not single size fits all, and they are not the final solution. In fact, you cannot solve a divergent problem. You can only manage it by balancing polarities. Okay, so we call the convergent problems either or simply or thinking, this or that. And we call divergent problems and thinking, this and that. This is also called integrative thinking. In management, often you're given two choices which are both not satisfactory. So you need to find something that has the best of both worlds. Okay, in the convergent problem domain, you have linear thinking. You say this causes that. But in divergent problems, you say this causes that and that causes this. And it keeps on happening in this infinite loop. Okay? So, in life, there are many problems that can be modeled as infinite games. Politics, as an example, is an infinite game. You make a choice, your opponent makes a choice, your neighbor makes a choice, and then you make a choice. Things are never static. In the OR world, with convergence problems, you can think of the thing you're studying as a machine. Okay, this is called mechanical modeling. But in divergent problems, you're always balancing. Living things, they cannot be modeled mechanically. Human beings are not like machines. But these days, because of the dominance of the convergent or thinking, we model human beings as machines. We model them as robots. And that is problematic. Okay, to finish this slide, we can think of convergent problem as thinking like a carpenter, and divergent problem as thinking like a gardener. Okay? Now, as a teacher, as a parent, which approach is better? Like, how do you want to do the tarbiyat of your children? Like a carpenter would create something, or like a gardener? The gardener approach is more superior. And the reason is because firstly, your child is a person. They have their own unique nature. They have their own preferences. So what you can do is you can give them space for excelling in many. You can give them the best upbringing, but not dictate things too much. This is also, approaches you can take to, planning in your life. When you try to act like a carpenter, you think of reality or the world as a machine you can fix. But the real world is complex and it's not fully controllable. So a better approach for dealing with living beings and for dealing with natural systems is to think like a gardener, do your job, to go and water the plants and to give it all the nutrients it is needing, but then leave it to God and leave it to God to show the circumstances and to inspire the creativity that how that thing should be managed, and then reacting to that with wisdom. So that's the way we should think with divergent problems. इस तरह के प्रॉब्लम्स को ज़्यादातर साइंस में स्टडी किया जाता है, कन्वर्जेंट प्रॉब्लम्स को. डाइवर्जेंट प्रॉब्लम्स को स्टडी किया जाता है इन अनदर डिसिप्लिन कॉल्ड सिस्टेमिक्स और सिस्टम्स थिंकिंग. ओके, ह्यूमैनिटीज इज more close to this way of thinking. So we need to have both. Multiplexity says we must have or with and. We should use or where it's appropriate. If you want to do science, you use this style. But if you're doing ethics, you cannot use this style. If you're doing politics, you cannot use this style. So this is the wisdom that comes from understanding the nature of the thing you're studying and using appropriate methods. Complexity requires multiplexity. So we are like these blind men who are trying to understand a complex thing. Like we are all blindfolded and we have different perspectives. So these 6 blind men, they would think and come up to different conclusions. Okay, someone would say that the trunk is like a snake, the ears are like fans, the body is like a wall, the legs are like tree trunks. They're all having fragmented, incomplete information. And we need to put all of this together through holistic thinking, to put the parts together to see the whole. So multiplexity suggests the use of a both and multiplex mindset instead of a reductionist either or approach. आपने ये लफ्ज़ सुना है reductionism? ये philosophy में इस्तेमाल होता है reductionism. It's a common word. Can you guess what it means? Very good. So in fact, reductionism means reducing the entire phenomena into just the part. जब हम analysis करते हैं तो हम parts को study करते हैं. And sometimes we say, for example, the human being is just a social animal. A human being is just the homo economicus, economical man. So we've reduced a very full picture into one part of it. But the reality was much deeper. So reductionism works in this fashion. It just replaces the true richer thing for a partial thing. In science, we use reductionism. So my question to you, you should be able to answer it now. Is reductionism good or bad? Do we require reductionism? Jay. We require reductionism because the thing we are studying is so complex, we cannot study it completely. So we must break it down to study, but the mistake is to say that this thing is the whole thing. That is the problem. Reductionism is a step you take, but then you also need to complement it with holism to see how the part is a part of the whole. So you need to see both things in parallel as poles that have to be combined to make you a holistic thinker. The problem is with science, we just do reductionism. We forget to put the things back together, to construct the multiplex being again. इसको हमटी डमटी प्रॉब्लम भी कहा जाता है. हमटी डमटी पता है क्या इसकी स्टोरी? हमटी डमटी की स्टोरी में क्या होता है कि Humpty Dumpty fell down and we could not put it back again. So Humpty Dumpty जिस तरह पार्ट्स में ब्रेक हो गया और वापस उसको जोड़ा नहीं गया, हमारी साइंस भी चीज़ों को एनालाइज करती है and fails to put it together. So to balance that we must do integration as well. आप में से FSC कितने लोग कर रहे हैं? O levels FSC. तो आपने कैलकुलस पढ़ा है? अभी नहीं पढ़ा. एक चीज़ होती है डिफरेंशिएशन, उसका ऑपोजिट क्या होता है? इंटीग्रेशन. वी नीड बोथ. Differentiation is useful, but then we need to put it back again. By putting both of them together, you come up with the whole which will help you more completely. So multiplexity is the science of the one and the many, which fundamentally underlies reality. By admitting different levels of truth, it can be pluralistic without falling into relativism. जिसका मतलब ये है कि आजकल some people say that there are multiple truths, but then they say everything is the same. But according to multiplexity, we say no, there are some certain truths, there are some subjective truths, and we have different layers for them. Multiplexity is a framework developed by a Turkish scholar called Professor Rajab Santok. I work with him. We've published some papers together on multiplex education, multiplex AI, and for all of these things, if you want more references, I can give you more ideas on what to read and how to follow up. In my slides, I've not included any reference, not to confuse and clutter things, but all of these things, they have related material. एक बहुत अच्छी किताब लिखी है एक साइकियाट्रिस्ट फिलोसोफर आयन मैकगिलक्रिस्ट की किताब है ये, द मास्टर एंड हिज एमिसरी. आप में से किसी ने ये किताब देखी है? He uses this parable that there was once a wise king. The wise king had a very smart minister, smart in the sense of like clever, not really wise. The king was wise, but the minister was very clever. So the master was doing many things, so he deputed his emissary, wazir, to go and rule a certain land. But then the emissary became too arrogant and said that I am sufficient on my own, I don't need to consult the master. The master was wise, and he could guide how the emissary should work. Eventually, the emissary completely undermined the master. So he goes on to show this story that we are like this as well. It's very interesting that our brain, it also has two hemispheres. There is a right hemisphere and there is a left hemisphere. And they do different things. Like, if you want to look narrowly at something, you lose focus of the things that are far away. And if you look far away, you lose the focus of things that are close to you. So our two brain hemispheres, they are looking at things but from a different perspective. The right hemisphere looks at things holistically, and the left hemisphere looks at things in an isolated way. So ideally, we would have liked a balance between these two. So he is a psychiatrist and he gives lots of scientific evidence that the Western civilization is like this. The left hemisphere has completely overwhelmed the right hemisphere. It's like this hemisphere is kal adam, as if it does not exist. Right? The emissary has killed the master. So now the emissary does what he wants to do, and the emissary is arrogant as well, and therefore he's never corrected. and he thinks he knows everything, but he does not look to the wise king. So there is a TED talk by Ian McGilchrist who describes the two hemispheres. The right hemisphere is the one which deals with the living things that are open-ended, and it requires a sustained attention and a broad view. The left hemisphere is related to controlling, manipulating things. If you want to do science, you can do it very well with the left hemisphere. However, for wisdom, you need to take the big picture. You need to think of things in its context. If you ask a philosopher any question, he will always say, it depends. If you ask engineer, what will the engineer say? Come, I will show you how to solve it. So that's why engineers are seductive. And if you watch a TV show, people who come on TV shows, they're very sure. They're almost always wrong, but they're very sure. They have a theory and they push it forward. The wise people, they're always like, this is the case and this is the case, it depends, and they describe things in a more balanced way. It also has some parallels in our Eastern tradition. So in Sufism, in Allama Iqbal's poetry, we find the parallel between Ishq and Aqal, where Aqal is used in this instrumental reason science sense, and Ishq is used in the holistic intellect, the systems thinking, and instrumental reason is the scientific way. So can anyone relate these two terms with the left and the right hemisphere? Instrumental reason would correspond to which hemisphere? The left or the right? The instrumental reason deals with the left, is related to the emissary, the analytical, the detail focus, which prefers linear, mechanistic view of the world, thinks of the world as a machine, thinks like a carpenter. Holistic intellect looks at the world with an integrative mode of thinking. So we require both, okay? And it is upon us to show this alternative. So I'm doing some research myself as well. We have some PhD students here. You need to think of how you can do your science in a balanced way, because our science, our religion is not something we do in isolation only some part of the way. To become whole, your religion should inform your science as well, and you should do it in a holistic manner that presents to the world an alternative that they are missing. This is what we mean by the ihya of Islamic knowledge. In your science, in AI, in communication, in economics, in politics, we need to get out of this exclusive focus on the instrumental reason and use holistic intellect and the revelation-based guidance to create effective, more wise systems for the world. Okay, so let's look at worldviews and multiplexity. Technology assumes a worldview in which we are like machines and like robots. Okay, so this is a famous roboticist. He wrote an article. The name of the roboticist is Rodney Brooks. He says, I am a robot. He wrote an entire article saying, I am nothing but a robot. And he says that we give human beings too much importance. And he thinks that in fact robots are exactly like human beings. So it's not like technology lives in a vacuum. There is a philosophical worldview. People are assuming those questions about what is a human, what is the purpose of life, what is a good life, what is ethics. This is questions that even technologists have to deal with. When people study economics, it has been shown through experiments, they become more stingy. They start thinking in the rational ways that their economics describes. They analyze everything in terms of economics. People have published articles saying that, it does not really make sense to have families. Why have families? You spend so much money on your children. In fact, they got some empirical results as well, which were flawed. If you go to a mother who is busy with a child and, the child is throwing a tantrum and you ask the mother, is it worth it? The mother would say, no, it's not worth it. I'm, depressed because of this. However, in economic terms, there are many things we do, creating beauty, enjoying, creating aesthetic art, having a family, social connections. Some people who begin to think in only one lens, they cannot, see things in a holistic fashion. So philosophy is like this. What you see above the surface is the visible effects of your science and technology. These things are publicly acknowledged and explicitly stated. Sometimes, these scientists state their philosophy, but many times these assumptions are not stated, but still they are there. So when we take a critical view, we want to look at what is the underlying assumption that has resulted in these theories. And with that, we can become more critical of how we should use this science, how we can use this technology. So methodology, epistemology, ontology are baked into the philosophy, and all of the laws that we have, they are making certain assumptions here. So we must look at and construct our own science, which is richer. So our science can use all of the empirical methods that are value neutral. At the same time, we can create our own technology, our own science as well. So when we talk of multiplexity means we use a multi-layered comprehensive approach. Uniplexity means we think everything is just single dimensional. We look at things in either or fashion, not in a multiple, multiplex, both and fashion. So in philosophy, there are two main approaches. One approach is positivism, the other is idealism. They are opposed to each other. Many of you would not be knowing this, but those of you who are more experienced in the philosophy of science, these are two opposing philosophies, and they are called uniplex because positivism just thinks of one thing and thinks of it in an exclusive way. It thinks that all that exists consists solely of matter. This is materialism. So positivism is related to materialism, and it would say there is no consciousness, there is no soul. You are just a brain. There are many scientists who believe like this. There are many neuroscientists who would say this. Idealism, on the other hand, says that the ultimate nature of reality is immaterial and mental. This is uniplexity, which looks at things by looking at only one pole. I hope you can now gather that in fact we have both these aspects. We have a soul which is immaterial, and we have a body which is material. So we need multiplex methodology. In the physical material world, we need to study it using empirical methods. And in the mental domain, there are other methods we can use. So this is the book I mentioned by Professor Rajab Santork. In fact, multiplexity is a modern idea which is a translation of traditional Islamic philosophy. In Islamic philosophy, there is a concept called maratib, which means hierarchy or levels. And there are levels of reality, there are levels of knowledge, there are levels of truth, there are levels of language. With multiplexity, we support both and thinking instead of either or thinking. Even our wujud is multiplex. Like I mentioned, we have malakiyat and bahimiyat. Who can tell me what is malakiyat and what is bahimiyat? Malakiyat is from malak. What is malak? Angel. Bahimiyat is from bahim, is like animals. So we have both these selves within ourselves. Okay, so this is multiplex ontology. Multiplex epistemology, we are going to cover these things in separate sections. Okay, this session is about multiplex epistemology, and later on we will study multiplex ontology as well. Okay, in multiplex epistemology we have aqaliyat, also naqaliyat, kashfiyat and hissiyat. Empirical knowledge is related to our 5 empirical senses. But apart from our physical senses, touch, smell, seeing, and the 5 senses, we also can think of things mentally. So the mental things are not physical things, but we can still have those concepts in our mind. This is called rational knowledge. We also have reported knowledge. Like the Quran, we see that sama is mentioned as a source of knowledge when we hear knowledge from others. And spiritual knowledge is kashfiyat or ilham. There are certain knowledge which are objective and binding, but some knowledge which is subjective. So if someone sees a dream, it might be a hujjah for them, but not for others. If someone has ilham, then it's not objective and true for everyone. But these sources, there is a science for that. So for revelation, for example, the science of hadith, there is a complete science for that. So with multiplex epistemology, we use all of these sources in appropriate ways instead of only relying on empirical knowledge or only on empirical and rational knowledge. Okay, I'm coming to the end of my talk. What is happening these days is that we are living in a world in which we are deifying science. We have made science as a god. And we think of science as the exclusive source of truth. This is called scientism. Okay, science on its own is not bad. Science, you should be pro-science. Science is a great thing. However, the problem becomes when you think of the science as it is done as the only approach to understanding reality. If you believe in that, what will happen? You cannot believe in God, because God cannot be directly observed. Okay? Even you will not be able to understand meanings of language, because that is also to be inferred. In language, we also have ambiguity. So science is a useful way, but it is not the only reliable method of getting at truth. Also, the second thing is that science deals with material entities, and when we have scientism, they say material entities are the most fundamental entities. But again, we don't believe in that. We believe soul is the most fundamental reality of human being, and material being is one of our aspect, but it is not the only or even the most fundamental aspect of our ontology. Science does a lot, but it cannot do everything. If you're interested, you can read these books which outline the limits of science. For example, science cannot tell us why there is something rather than nothing. It cannot tell us what happened before the universe's beginning. It cannot tell us the meaning of life or the purpose of existence in an authentic manner. So I asked you to guess the meaning of reductionism. Now I have an illustration which shows reductionism in action. I explained this through an example of a mythical character. So there was this Greek character called Procrustes. Procrustes was a violent man. Like these days, science is violent. Whatever does not match its view, it maims it, it kills it away. So Procrustes was often hosting people, but whenever the guests would come, he had a fixed size bed. And when the guest was taller than the bed, can you guess what he would do? He would just chop off the extra material. And when the guest was too short, so you can stretch the person. So scientists also fall, some scientists, those who go into scientism, they stretch reality to fit the model they have. And anything that does not fit the model, they say that it does not exist. So this is how they explain that your consciousness, your soul is not a reality. Your inner world is just an epiphenomena. It is something emerging from your material self. It is not something independent. It's not a separate soul. So reductionism also, if you watch a TV pundit, if you watch a talk show, they always have a model in mind and they fit reality according to that. If something else had happened, they would have fitted the reality in a different way, but their model does not change. So reductionism works in this fashion. You have a model and then you interpret the reality in that way. So this is a good book I refer to people who are interested in philosophical reading by E.F. Schumacher. He comes up with an interesting example showing this reductionism. In real life, we often make use of maps. The maps are supposed to show everything important. Okay, but Schumacher describes that once he went to a city and he was looking at a map, and in front of him he had a church. And he was looking at the map was not showing the church. So he asked a person that, this is a big building, why is it not shown on the map? The person said that we don't show churches on our maps. But then Schumacher said that, no, in this map there is this church. The man said, no, this is a museum. We don't show a living church. We only show the museums. So the signs we are using these days are like these incomplete maps. They show some aspect, but lots of the things, especially our inner world, that is explained away by science. So we covered a lot in this session. So if there are any comments, any questions.
Donate us to bring change in society and make a meaningful impact. Account number 322630100005753. Faysal Bank Limited. Follow us to stay connected and see the difference you're making.